everybody.
Okay, so now we are up to page 7, and want to just refresh what we said. I'm not going to do this every one of our classes for this entire book of Vayikra Leviticus, but it's going to have to be brought up at least in the beginning a few times, and then probably scattered through. The book of Vayikra of Leviticus focuses on details of the service in the tabernacle, in the temple, because that's the mitzvah the Jews had after Moshe came down from Mount Sinai with the second tablets. The next day, he gave them the mitzvah of building the tabernacle, which would be a place where they could recreate the divine intimacy that they felt standing at Sinai, which was, an incredible open display of godliness, of godly love, and they're reciprocated by the Jewish people. And the tabernacle would be a place of not just what we can find within our hearts and minds and see in our mind's eye and relating to God, and no matter where we are, but the tabernacle would be a place where it would be much more palpable, be a clear embrace between us and God. What would go on in the tabernacle? There were different functions, but central to that was the offerings. Now, I don't want to go into all the details mentioned last week, but just to be, just upfront about it, is that the offerings, in the majority, they dealt with bringing animals on the altar, which means the animals were died. They were slaughtered. So for us, that's, first of all, even from the Torah thinking Jew who looks through the Torah, has made it to this third book of the Torah, and at the very outset of the Torah, we're told that there were 7 laws for all humanity, not just for Jews. Before, there was a Torah given to Jews, and one of those laws is a prohibition of cruelty to animals. And prohibition of cruelty to animals means that we can't hunt for sport. We can't unnecessarily, not only an animal, but any tree, a leaf. We don't take any living thing away from its source of life unless there's a higher purpose for it. And as I said, it's like if we knock down trees to build a shul or to build a house, that's okay, that's fine, but not an extra tree and not an extra branch is taken down. And certainly not with animals. And Adam and Eve themselves were told not to eat, not to kill for food. And that was only after the flood that God gave license to Noah to eat meat of animals and to be able to kill for food. But there too, for food is killing of the animal for the sake of human progress, human experience. So that is a perspective where, again, there are a lot of different perspectives in the world. And some will say that they don't tell me that they don't believe in eating meat because of humane reasons. That are certainly entitled to their opinion, and I'm not going to argue it. We're studying Torah. Torah's perspective is that it is permissible within reason, and that's so the idea of taking an animal's life is more seen as incorporating that animal into human life, because the meat of the animal empowers human life and brings nutrition to human life. And if it's empowering, if the meat I ate last night, I didn't, but I ate meat last night, and that's empowering my ability to make good choices today and bring light to the world, that's great. And the animal is part of that mitzvah, part of that equation. and we generally want to incorporate as much of the world into our positive choices. So there are clearly here there is the idea of offering animals, and it's something that we're going to keep coming up against. Now, in the offerings, as I said to begin with, the soul of the offerings is about our coming close. The Hebrew word for an offering or sacrifice, and I don't like that word sacrifice, but the Hebrew word is korban. That's the one that's consistently used in the Torah. Korban, just on a Hebrew linguistic level, it's very clear that its root word is karov, which means to be close, be relative, means closeness. So it was a coming close mechanism. Now, if it's a coming close mechanism, question would be, so the Torah, why doesn't the Torah talk to us about that? The Torah doesn't talk to us too much about the emotional dynamics. Actually, almost nothing about the emotional dynamics. It's more about the functional dynamics. So it's as though this incredible union of us and God, the embrace of us and God, is affected because me taking an animal and slaughtering it and bringing it up in flames on an altar. Why would that do anything for me? So we discussed a bit last week about the commitment to the super rational, because this is a super rational mitzvah. But aside from that, it is really glaring by its seeming omission, that there seems to be no thought about it, no mention of it. So one of the things that Rabbi pointed out is that the first offering, and we've spoken of 4 different types of offerings. Some of them are mandatory and some of them are voluntary. And the first offering that they mention here is one that is, in many cases, a voluntary offering. And it's called a gift offering in the Hebrew, which means that someone wants to give a gift to God. They want to give something to God. When do you want to give a gift? When you have good feelings, when you want to express closeness, when you want to be able to express respect and care and fondness, you give a gift. So the first offering is the gift offering. And what they pointed out is that and you can see it in some of the commentaries also, as he points out, this offering sets the tone for the rest of the offerings. And that every one of the offerings, even if it's an offering that they had to bring, someone violated a prohibition of the Torah and they have to bring an offering, it's part of their penance. The core of it is about the gift offering, not necessarily that it's a gift, but that there's a desire to come close, a desire to reach out and to embrace someone else. In this case, God, because that's the reason we give a gift. So with that preface, I want to take a look at how they wrote where we're up to, which is page 7 on the right side. One paragraph up from the bottom says the laws regarding voluntary offerings will be given first. Okay. One would think that the Torah would begin with the obligatory offerings, yet those are left for later, right? If you're giving, putting out a structure of things to do, and it's a manufacturer's manual, it's a how-to manual for life. It's talk about first things that have to happen, but yet they're left for later. Why? Because by beginning with voluntary offerings, the Torah implies that all offerings, even the obligatory ones, should be voluntary in essence, which is what I was trying to bring up before. A voluntary offering is brought by a person cognizant of the spiritual significance of the offering. He knows that the offering must express an inner process occurring within the person, not the animal. What matters is not the size or precedence of the animal, but the intention of the heart. So when you talk about a voluntary offering, and they don't bring it here, but it's called a gift offering. The person bringing the offering understands that this is something that is not, there is a function. There's a function to me giving a gift. I buy this or I buy that. I wrap it, don't wrap it, whatever it is. There's a function to the right way to give a gift. But that's just to give a gift because you have to, or because you feel that there's going to be backlash if you don't. It's a hollow gift, and we all know that. And in human life, maybe we do it anyway. But if one's going to the temple and we're giving a gift offering, we're giving a voluntary offering, we know that this is something about what we're feeling. We're expressing what we're feeling through the function with the animal. But the function with the animal is somewhat secondary because it's a voluntary offering. It's the heart of the offering is our heart. It's what we're feeling. And as we're saying, it's the inner process occurring within the person of the animal. The importance of the involvement of the offerer's mind and heart is expressed by the Hebrew word for sacrifice, korban, which is derived from the verb to bring close. The experience of the offering consists of bringing and offering oneself, devoting one's hearts and talents and capabilities to God. So when one is bringing an offering, they're coming close to God. What they're saying is, God, I love you. I'm yours. That's what the offering is. The offering is us telling God, yes, I have a life, I have a business, I have a 401k, I have different loves and fears, but God, I'm all yours. Ultimately, I'm all yours, and I want to be who you want me to be. So that is the soul of all offerings. And that's why we begin with the voluntary offering, because it's the expression of this gift, this token of love to God, which is really more about our feeling, how we feel towards God. So that's one level. Now, they're going to get into a deeper point of this, and I want to try and explain it to try to get my mind around it, our minds around it. There is the idea that even if we don't consciously feel for God right now, subconsciously it's there. Now, a person may tell me and say, Rabbi, trust me, it's not there. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to pretend to know you better than you know yourself. At the same time, the Torah is the human user's manual, and the Torah tells me that there is a deeper part of the soul that's always connected to God and always wants to be embraced by God and always wants to embrace God. I believe that. Again, it's hard for me to say it, but it is my operating perspective that I just have to be able to, it's there. And we want to try to draw it out if possible, but it is there. Therefore, if someone, if a FedEx guy comes in now to deliver a package and last name is Schwartz, and I ask him if he's Jewish, and he says yes, and I say, you're going to do me a favor, we'll just do a easy pass fill and do a quickie. And maybe he does it just to do me a favor. He's not thinking about it. It doesn't float his boat. It's still a mitzvah because it's functional, but also I believe that a part of him, not consciously, also cares about this mitzvah. And there's a part of him that's quiet and kind of dormant within him, but is woken up and is delighted by the opportunity to do a mitzvah. I guess it could be similar to, let's say, if I'm really tired one day and I'm running around and I'm exhausted, and one of my kids asks if I do a favor and I have to drive to Summit to go pick something up for them at 10 o'clock at night. I'm going to do it, and it's obviously I'll take care of that, even if I'm not feeling consciously so happy right now that because I'm just tired and I just want to make sure I get my task done. if I could, pause or come to myself and think about what's going on, of course I'm happy. Deep inside, I'm happy. Right now, I'm just thinking about I want to get this done and then be able to go home to go to bed or whatever. But it's not always are we going to feel consciously delighted that we're doing something for a loved one. But if we stop and we think about it and we focus our minds on what we're doing, and the relationship, the opportunity to strengthen that relationship, it's a great thing. It's not in the consciousness, but it's there, more subconscious perhaps. Now, similar to that, there is this an idea, or maybe I don't know if it's not similar to that, but perhaps using that we can try to understand. There is an idea Maimonides brings in his code of law, and his code of law is about law, not about spiritual ideas and lessons in life. It's about law. And one of the things he writes there is when it comes to the laws of divorce, he writes that a divorce must be given willingly by a man. The way the divorce is effectuated is the man has to give a document to the woman. She has to accept it willingly. He has to give it willingly. So Maimonides says, what happens if he doesn't want to give it? The court feels that it's necessary, and he doesn't want to give it. So he writes, we force him until he says, I want to give it, which is kind of funny because he's saying we physically force him, and until he says, uncle, he says, I want to give it, and say, oh, good. Now we're done, which is obviously at some level of fraud. He doesn't want to give it. That's why we're forcing him. So Maimonides goes further and says, this does not contradict my earlier statement that it has to be given willingly. He said, because everybody, he says every Jew, but everybody deep inside wants to do the right thing, even if it's not conscious. So what gets in the way? Our ego, our weaker negative inclination. So the forcing of this man to give it is helping to dispel the static of his weaker side, his negative inclination, so that his true desire, the desire to do the right thing, can be expressed, and that was giving the get. So it's something that we don't see, and I think on the face of things, it's a little curious. It's you're twisting someone's arm until he says, I want to do it, and you call it willingly. It's in our world as we experience it, it's asymmetric. But what Maimonides is saying as a matter of law is that we can be safely assume that everybody deep inside wants to do the right thing, and they're not feeling it. But them doing it is in sync with their deepest desire. So now, having said that, let's take a look at the final paragraph here. It says, on a deeper level, a sacrifice is an experience of the mind and heart, even when the offerer is not aware of it. This is because our inner essence, our divine soul, is always intrinsically aware of the true meaning of the state of our relationship with God and in what ways it needs to be enhanced or improved. This being the purpose of the offering. So the offering, the coming close, it's a coming close. When I'm running whatever 11 o'clock at night to go pick up something for one of my kids in Summit, I'm going through a coming close exercise. I'm not thinking about that right now. I'm thinking about getting there, getting back, and getting back to my life. I'm not angry about it, but I'm just not. It's such a feel good thing. At least in this scenario. But ultimately, what I'm doing is something special. It's an expression of love. I'm not thinking it. It doesn't change the truth of it. And deep inside, of course, that's what I know is the truth. Therefore, the Torah does not state explicitly that the physical offering up, I don't know, English is a little funny. The physical offering up of the animal must be accompanied by the spiritual inner offering up of the person. Since this is always the case, at least at the soul level. So here, they're bringing a secondary comment from the Rebbe on the fact that the Torah doesn't say you have to get into your psycho-spiritual gear to be able to be in a close place before you bring the offering. First of all, Torah doesn't do much in commanding us on emotions, because you really can't command emotions. But the implication is clear that it's a voluntary offering, it's a gift offering, and even if the person doesn't feel it, deep inside you do. Instead, the Torah begins its discussion of offerings in general with the voluntary offerings, which manifestly involve the offerer's mind and heart, to indicate that all offerings, even those offered out of obligation, are essentially voluntary offerings, and that they stem from the soul's innate desire to come close to God. Okay, so that's one comment. And one insight, Chassidic insight. If there's any questions, fine. If not, we can go forward. No comments. Okay, so just want to, before we're going to be on page 8, but I want to go back to page 7 just to look at the verse that we're explaining here. It
Mendy,
says when a man. I'm sorry.
If I can still ask a question before we move on. Can you hear me?
I can hear. Yeah.
Okay, great. So you talk about like for the get, like the rabbis forcing the husband to realize what's good for him, what he wanted to do in the first place.
Right.
What are the parameters for who gets to decide what's good for other people, or is it really just specific limited cases, like for a get or for this? Like, because I can imagine some people coming up to someone and shaking them down for, it's for your own good that you should donate $1 million to our charity or something like that. Misguided somewhat.
So
or other less trivial examples.
Right. None of us really have the right to decide what's good for the other. A rabbinic court does, if there's, so in a case where where a court is adjudicating between an estranged husband and wife, and unfortunately, I had a very close friend who went through this, and he'd come out to my house sometimes, and he was going through a very hard time, and he's a friend. Doesn't mean I thought he was right with things, but I didn't know, but I know he's a friend. And I knew he was delaying on the get, and they were negotiating, and divorce is difficult. But his wife took the case to a bet din. And the bet din ruled that he must immediately give the get. And until he did, it was not welcome in my house. Very close friend for many years. But that was no longer something. It's this debate, two different people, two different perspectives. It's the court said you must give it, and it hurt me, and it somewhat hurt our relationship still, even though he ended up giving it after a while. But then it wasn't, I'm saying you got to do this. The court said, and that's the way it is. So we trust that the court is issuing. The Torah's perspective. It's the Torah perspective. There's no more arguing.
So community pressure also plays a role, or can play a role.
Community pressure is definitely something like that. And since I opened up this door, this friend of mine, his first child got engaged in the middle of all this, and he called me. He said, "Can you come to Crown Heights and be with me?" Because he saw the family, the kids were against him, and he asked me to be with him, and I was there early with him because just for the initial engagement, and I was there, and a lot of our classmates were there with him by the wedding, and one of his wife's, I know both sides very well, and one of his wife's brothers-in-law was close to me. He called me and said, why, how could you do that? Well, what? So I said, because there's two sides. He's still a friend. If there's something from a bed din, I'm out. But until then, I'm not the judge. I don't know. He's suffering. I don't know what went on with there. But if he's asking me to come to his child's simcha, I want to be there for him. And when the bet din did, and part of what happened after that was that when it became once the bet din ruled and he still didn't give it, and none of us showed up for his second wedding. I'm not saying that's what caused it, but that broke it more. It was he started realizing he's not getting any support once there was a ruling from the bet din. It's sad, but yeah, I mean today, no one was gonna physically coerce him, but although that has been done, but that's not. I don't think we do that. But the idea of community pressure, if there's I think it's a good. It's a positive thing. Unfortunately, sometimes it's necessary, and if a bet din has ruled, I think that the community pressure is warranted.
Okay, thank you. It's interesting.
Okay. So, so I wanted to look at the verse that's on page 7. So that there's the bolded, which is the words itself. So I'm not sure why the word in the verse itself is Adam. Adam is like Adam. Adam means a person. Default, you could say it's a male, because it's because Hebrew is broken down into masculine and feminine in just in the verbiage of it, and it is on the masculine side, but it means a person, and the original Adam was androgynous. So if I was going to translate this, instead of doing it when a man put that in bold, and then put or woman not in bold, I would just put when a person from among you brings whatever, so then you encompass man and woman, and it's all direct from the Torah. The reason I'm saying that is because it's going to come up here in the Chassidic insights also. I don't understand why they're focusing on man so much. I'm sure they have a reason, but it's really about a person. Now, look again, looking back at the verse also. They had to translate, and translation is a tricky business, because translation is not the syntax and the flow from language. It can differ from language to language. So if you try to translate, and I've done quite a bit of translation, if you try to translate word for word for word for word, it's going to come out disjointed often. You have to make it flow within the language you're translating into. So if you wanted to translate this verse word for word, it would say, when a person offers from you an offering to Hashem, to God. When a person offers from you, not when a person from you offers, when a person offers from you. Here, obviously, they said when a man and a woman from among you brings a voluntary, because that's what the flow is better. But the Torah could have very easily. Sometimes it's just a matter of language, but to have transposed those words in Hebrew, I hope I'm making sense, and put the from you before, saying when a person from among you, Odem mikem, when a person from among you offers an offering, this is what you do. That would make sense Hebrew-wise also, but the Torah doesn't do that. The Torah says when a person offers from you, and this is developed quite a bit in Chabad thought. The idea of that, and we're going to get into it now, is the idea that the offering is from you. So there's a few different ways to read it, and again, there's quite a bit about this about thought. But let's look at a few different ways of reading it. We're going to go to page 8. When a person from you brings a sacrifice to God, or offering to God, the fact that the nouns and verbs we herein translate as sacrifice, offering, to sacrifice, to offer up, are all derived from the same Hebrew root, meaning drawing close, indicates that the sacrifices are the ultimate experience of closeness to God that we can achieve. When we offer up a sacrifice, we do not merely connect a specific aspect of our personality with a specific aspect of divinity, as we do when we fulfill any of God's other commandments. Rather, give ourselves away totally to God. There are times when we're talking to a loved one and we're talking about a specific aspect of their personality, and we praise it and we love it, and we embrace it, I guess, in some way. And there's a certain part of us is saying, I appreciate this. I appreciate this because this is what it means to me. Then there's just giving ourselves away, saying, I love you for you. It's like you do with an infant. The infant really hasn't given you anything, and the infant hasn't been cute or cleaned up or done anything, but the infant is yours. So the idea of the offering, it said it before, is really, it's like saying to God, I'm all yours because I love you in entirety. There are two ways in which we can experience a desire to come close to God. Either as a result of God's initiative, which we experience as an unanticipated, divinely inspired, sudden desire to cling to Him, or as a result of our own yearning for spirituality. So here, the tack they're taking with this to begin with is that in general, life is about our relationship. It's about relationships, our relationship with ourselves, relationship with God, relationship with the world, with our families, or with others. And in our relationship with God, we can't see God. And the inspiration to feel close to God can go two ways. Either I'm sitting here, or I'm driving, I'm in the shower, I'm driving down 78, and something comes up, an inspiration. I feel, for whatever reason, I want to do something that makes me feel more Jewish, that really concretizes my connection with God, because I'm a Jew. Where did that thought come from? I'm not sure. But you can say that's a gift from above. Or I can sit down in the morning or in the afternoon and say, I'm running a little dry. I want to study. I want to position myself for inspiration. I want to try to get myself ignited. The two different things. This idea of God gifting us with inspiration, or us trying to dig up our own. So does God giving us this sudden desire, or a result of our own yearning for spirituality? This notion is reflected in the different ways this verse can be read. Let us first note that the literal order of the words is as follows. A man, if he offers up from you a sacrifice to God, from the animal, from the cattle, from the flock, offer up your sacrifice. Thus, if God takes the initiative, we read the verse like this. If a man, again, I think it's a person, I would rather the translation, because that's what it is, Adam. If God, and God, we say the supernal man, the idea of in Jewish spiritual thinking, we can't visualize God, but we anthropomorphically we talk about God as the supernal human. We talk about this Sephirot, all the divine energies, because we mirror God. We are created as people. We are created in the image of God, and God is the original model. Not that God's a human, not that God's a person, but the God is what we can conceptualize as a person, and we conceptualize, and in Kabbalistic language we refer to God as Adam Ha'elyon, the higher person, supernal person. So if this supernal person draws close, desires to bring us close to him, then there will be from you a drawing close to God. So hopefully this will create a reciprocal desire for closeness on your part. I feel I'm driving down 78 and I feel this inspiration, and hopefully it will create something concrete in me to be able to act on it and anchor that closeness and expand it, which we'll experience as a divine soul drawing us towards God. However, if the relationship does not move beyond God's initial initiative, it will soon dissipate. It's like we have, sure, very often, you have a good thought, an inspiring thought, I should do this. And then life happens and you didn't do it. So if one has been working to find inspiration and they're able to find it, it's much more solid and it has much more traction in my life because I've invested in it. That I had unasked for a feeling of closeness and inspiration with God. If I don't act on it, it's just going to be a flash in the pan. So it says, you must bring your sacrifice from the animals. In order to ensure this arousal's permanence and growth, we must also involve our animal soul. For then our connection with God will not be solely as a result of an external influence, but of our own efforts as well. So where do we turn? Where do we focus if we want to take that seed of inspiration and plant it in our lives and cultivate it? It can't just be that, yes, my higher visionary self says that this is great. My operating system is not my higher visionary self. My operating system is my instinctive self. And therefore, I've got to look and say, how can I change my normal behaviors with my appetites and all of that? And because that's ultimately how I operate. So how can I anchor this inspiration and modify my own animal to make space for it so that it can really, this can grow. If we take the initiative, we read the verse as follows. If a man or woman draws close, or as a person, if we are aroused on our own to become close to God. From you yourself, a sacrifice to God. We must sacrifice something of our own self. Merely slaughtering a physical animal will not in itself change us. We must bring our own sacrifice. It's when we sweat, when we invest of ourselves in the relationship, then that's when we own it. That's when it's real. And what I'm saying is, if we want to be able to do that, we have to look at our animal and say, what can I do to bring my animal close to God? From the animal means from our own animal self, our materialistic drives, which, like an animal, are interested only in self-gratification, and which slowly lead us astray from the path of spiritual growth. As I mentioned last week, I believe, an animal, as wonderful as they are, and as cuddly and loving as they are, and all the good things about animals and pets, animals are instinctive. And you can shape their instinct, but they are instinctive. So for us, the purely instinctive, so some animals have a great instinct, a loving instinct, whatever it is. Human beings are more complicated. And if we just follow our instincts, for most of us, that's going to create some trouble. If we can even afford to follow our instincts. Because instincts means appetites or the sensual desires, all of that. So animals, it sounds a little harsh that they're interested only in self-gratification. Not selfish, but that's what an animal is. An animal can't say, these people, no one trained me not to pee on the carpet, but I see they just vacuumed it. I'm not going to do it because they've been nice to me. They can't. They don't have the capacity to regulate themselves unless they're taught to. which means you're changing you're shaping their instinct. Okay. This animal must be slaughtered. The lifeblood and excitement must be let out from these activities and sprayed upon the altar, transferred to the divine source. So one of the representations of this, as the founder of Chabad put it, where they're getting this from, is that the essential part of the service was the blood. What's the blood? The blood is in us. Blood is a barometer. It's life, literally life. We need blood coursing through our bodies, and the blood is a barometer of our feeling. Also, we get excited. The blood pressure can go up. We're frightened. The face drains. We become pale. It's the blood is a reflection of our feelings and our passions. So the idea of saying we're going to take the blood, the passion, the excitement that goes into my animal, and I'm going to offer it up to God, put it on the altar. Say, yes, so I'm still going to be eating 3 times a day because I'm human. I'm still going to have a car because I need a car. I'm still going to have a house because I need a house. But I'm going to make it nice. But it's the idea, that's not, my passion is going to lie in the meaningful things I can do using the energy from my food. The meaningful things I can do with my car. Yes, I'm buying a Volvo because it's a safe car. Right, no problem. But now the question is, am I excited because I pulled into my driveway with a Volvo and my neighbor only has a Ford? Or is that now my excitement is that I'll be safe and I'll be able to use my car to be the productive person God wants me to be, and my house the same. So the question is the redirecting of the passions. Of course, we must attend to our mundane needs as necessary, but a joy and excitement should be reserved for higher calls. It is only through such commitment and self-sacrifice that we can hope to become a sacrifice for God, a true expression of closeness to God. And then it says we bring up from the cattle or from the flock. We bring it up from either from cattle or from sheep. Offer up your sacrifice. Our inner animal can wear several guises. At times, our animal soul is as aggressive as a rampaging ox, coarsely and forcefully overrunning anything in its way. That's the image of the ox. We have to look and say, do I have that? Other times, other people may resemble a timid sheep who submits to cravings readily and willingly. Do I stand up not only to others for good things? Do I stand up to myself? Say, no, this isn't a good thing for me. Whatever type of animal our animal soul may resemble, it must be overcome and sacrificed. In this way, we can truly draw close to God. Yet again, if a human draws close, if we experience a desire to become close to God, we may hesitate thinking, how can I possibly achieve such a goal? I know that I'm on a very low spiritual level. I'm sullied my soul with improper behavior. In such cases, I'm going to leave that. Again, this is coming from numerous, they're calling from different sources. Another way of reading this is to say, when a person wants to come close to God, a person wants to embrace God. Wants to embrace God means they want to be a person. You or I want to be the person who God created us to be, and I wanted to have openness to and not carry baggage with us that separates us from God. So we're in that position where we want to be able to be in sync with God. And then I'll say to myself, so that's what I'm thinking this morning. And then I say to myself, well, who am I fooling? I've made so many mistakes. I'm not near where Torah would really want me to be. So I'm like spitting in the wind. I can't do it. So in that sense, the Hasidic thought says, we read it when a person brings an offering, comes close, it's from you. It's up to you. God gives you the capacity to make that step. And if you're coming close, if you're making the effort, that's really where it's at. We must recall that from you, it depends only on our desire and dedication. No matter where we stand on the ladder of holiness, no matter what spiritual baggage may seem to weigh us down, God gives us the strength and ability to fulfill all that He asks of us. And when we sincerely attempt to become closer to God, we are assured that our efforts will be successful. I don't know if there are any questions on that. But if not, we'll go back to page 7 to look at the closer look. The closer look in this Chumash is not so much spiritual insights, but more, it seems to me more like technical insights. So closer look at the bottom of 7. Communal offerings. Some communal sacrifices were indeed offered up on the first of Nisan. Remember, we said that this is all happening opening day of the temple, of the tabernacle, which was the first day of Nisan. Which as they're approaching the first anniversary of the exodus from Egypt. So on that day, there were some communal offerings necessary too. The 2 daily offerings. There were 2 daily offerings, one to start the offerings and one in the afternoon to end the offerings. That's what we call the shachar and mincha. Like we have today, morning prayers, it reflects the first offering, and mincha, the afternoon prayer, reflects the second one. So everything else had to take place in between them, and they were communal ones. They were perpetual ones every day, and the additional offering for the rest of the month, Rosh Chodesh. Today is Rosh Chodesh, Rosh Chodesh Adar, Adar 1. I should mention that today is the beginning of the month of Adar, and in a Jewish leap year, which happens 7 times in every 19-year cycle. There's in a leap year where there's an extra Adar. Adar is the month before Passover. The Passover month is called Nisan, and because Pesach always has to be in the spring, the Torah calls it a spring holiday, and we're a lunar calendar, so which means that it would, left to its own devices, everything would rotate through all the seasons. When Pesach would be brought back, drawn into the winter, we have to bump it forward and we insert an extra month. That's Adar Rishon, Adar Sheni, Adar 1, Adar 2. So today is Rosh Chodesh of Adar 1. And on Rosh Chodesh, we bring also a special communal offerings for the Rosh Chodesh. However, in all these cases, Moses performed the rites himself. There was therefore no need. Okay, on 8, all the way to the right, to teach the priests and the people at large the laws regarding these sacrifices until later. Okay. Ascent offerings. So ascent offerings were brought for specific things. They could be just voluntary, and then we brought them for certain types of transgressions also. An example of transgressing an act of commandment. One of the things was if I did something wrong, I had a ham sandwich. So then there could be an offering for me to bring. What happens? It's not that I did something that's a prohibition, but I didn't do something I should have done. I didn't say the Shema. So an example of transgressing an act of commandment that is no longer possible to perform is neglecting to recite the Shema. Shema has a limited time. I lost it. There's the morning Shema and the evening Shema. The time for the morning Shema has already passed. So not doing that, neglecting a positive commandment during its prescribed time, that is something which would necessitate an olah, an ascent offering. Or it could be for a negative commandment. They call it a passive commandment, which is fine. A negative commandment which we can rectify. What is that? Because if I have my ham sandwich, there's not even vomiting it up is not going to make much of a difference. But an example of a passive commandment reparable by an active commandment is stealing. If a person steals something, it's possible to atone for the theft by returning the stolen item. Of course, the person has to apologize. But then, if they return the item, they've rectified, realigned what they messed up. If the stolen item has been lost, or the person from whom it was stolen has died, then this option is no longer available, and atonement can only be achieved via the Ascent Offering. In the case of these types of transgressions, God forgives us our misdeeds as soon as we have repented properly. Meaning that means that we've regretted committing the misdeed, we've confessed our guilt, and resolved not to repeat our mistake. Right? We recognize what we did in the past. We've confessed it verbally to God and resolved not to repeat it. If we were wronged another person, God's forgiveness is contingent upon our first righting the wrong to that person. First thing you got to do is make sure God's not going to forgive me until the other person forgives me. However, in order to not only be forgiven, meaning be absolved from God's punishment, but also be reinstated in His good graces, meaning to be as beloved by Him as we were before the transgression, and an Ascent Offering is required. Okay, this is not a criticism of the text here, but it's a translation of something. I don't think that there's. I don't want to. I don't think it's accurate to paint ourselves as being less beloved to God, whatever, after someone has done something. The idea is, if we want to totally undo the damage, you can apologize, and the person forgive you, but there's, we bury the hatchet, but we'll all remember where it's buried. In order to totally rehabilitate the relationship, in order to turn the clock back, so to speak, then not only do we apologize and confess and all of that, but we bring this ola, bring a gift. Spending money on an animal that we then watch to be consumed in flames on the altar helps us to both dematerialize and spiritualize our lives. When the temple is not standing and is therefore not possible to offer up offerings, the reinstatement into God's good graces that the sacrifices would have effect that can be achieved through fasting. In the Talmud, it tells us that fasting is a way of doing teshuvah. But don't get off the Zoom yet. If fasting is not possible or practical, that we do it through giving charity. And then this is an important parenthesis here, is for this reason that in the past 2 centuries, charity has all but replaced fasting as a substitute for sacrifices. We fast in Kippur, Tisha B'Av, we fast the ones which are institutionalized fasts. We don't fast voluntary fasts anymore, at least not in Chabad, not in much of the world that I know of, even though the Talmud talks about it. Recent generations are no longer strong enough to fast frequently while continuing to function at full mental, emotional, and physical capacity. In each of these cases, we're giving to God some part of our physical selves. In the case of fasting, page 9, go all the way to the right, the body mass we lose. In the case of charity, the money we could have used to buy food, similar to how in offering up a sacrifice, we were destroying part of our physical property for the sake of spiritual restoration. So we're giving of ourselves in the body mass, or in the case of the money. I'm giving money to charity. I could have used it to buy something that gives me pleasure, giving that pleasure to God, giving part of myself to God. According to a great medieval rabbi, Rabbi Mendy, an Ascent Offering is required also to atone for having inadvertently neglected to perform an active commandment, or having neglected to perform the active commandment that compensates for transgressing a passive commandment. And in addition, for having inadvertently committed a sin for which the punishment is lashes or death by the court. And they're giving you this technical. According to Nachmanides, a person may also bring a voluntary Ascent Offering simply as a means of spiritual growth unoccasioned by sin. We're up to that's that. If there's any questions, we can have them. If not, we'll continue our journey through this third book of the Torah, which we're gonna have to adjust our thinking to it. But,
Mendy,
yeah,
Okay.
how did Noah brought two of each, male and female of the animals? Only two of each?
no, it says some of 7.
I'm sorry?
7 of the ones that he could bring his offerings. He brought 7.
But did he bring all the animals that existed at that time?
That's what it says.
So how many of each did he bring?
It says 2 of each, and then, but it says even though there was no kosher laws there, it says between the impure or pure animals, it distinguishes either 2 or 7.
This is going to sound stupid.
No,
How did he decide which two to bring?
great question. The Medrash tells us that they themselves came to the ark.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And the rest just vanished with the rest of the people.
That's my assumption.
Aye.
Yeah, yeah. That flood was a bummer.
All right. I hope you feel better. Take
Thanks.
lots of vitamin C.
Sure.
Yes, Rabbi. And chicken soup
Yeah.
can never hurt.
Of course not.
As my Bubba would say, it couldn't hurt.
Good night.
It couldn't hurt.
Feel
Thank you.
better. Feel
Thank you.
better.
Bye-bye.
Be
All right,
well,
thank you.
Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.